Okay. All right, so it's, thank you, Daniela, for inviting me. Thank you all for putting up with me, and it's nice to be back. Hope everybody had a nice summer. Okay? We were back in the Alterheim for a month. If this resonates by anybody, in the Pocono Mountains in Camp Moshava.
Yes.
Yeah, it resonates, huh? A lot of us grew up in Camp Moshava. So, okay, we're starting, we're ready well into the month of Elul, and therefore the request has been to talk a little bit about Elul. And so what we're going to do today is, talk about the period of time, about the ideas of Teshuvah, but also we're going to include with that the discussion B'chlal, something about Mitzvot, a little Ramchal, a little Ramban, about Eretz Yisrael, make ourselves feel good about that as well. And we'll throw this all in, and hopefully we'll be finished, when was it? By 12:30, 1 o'clock, whatever it was. It'll be good.
4:30.
4:30. As long as they bring lunch in the middle. Pizza. We'll order for pizza. All right. So, some of you also might be familiar. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman is famous. He had the yeshiva in Baranovich. I think it's close to Lita. And it's famous that he was in America at the beginnings of World War II, at the Shoah. And he actually said he can't leave his Talmidim, and he went back to Europe, and unfortunately found he was murdered in the Kovna ghetto in 1944. But his Svarim till today are famous in the yeshivas. His Kovetz Sha'arim and Kovetz Ma'amarim. It's like basic lumdis that you'll still, it's like we say, Sfatav Dovavot Mi'akever, that he's still speaking to us. So what I'm going to tell you today, you can look it up, it's based on the Ma'amar Al Teshuvah. He has a couple of one-liners over there that my Rebbe, anybody from Chicago over here? So my Rebbe was Rav David Fuchs. I don't know if that rings, in English it was David Fox. David Fuchs. He's from the Tekufa, he's no longer with us. He was from the Tekufa when Rav Kreisworth came to Chicago, if that rings a bell at all. And and he made Aliyah, like before his death, must have been here for 60 years, never left the country. I asked him once to come to Camp Moshava, and he said some kind of line like, he said, I love my wife, I don't want to leave her, I'm not going to leave the country. But then another time he said to me he doesn't want to put his mitzvos on a different level. He wouldn't leave. So 60 years he was here. So anyway, I learned this from him, and he expounded on the Ma'amar Al Teshuvah. So just we'll go through it based upon both these Rabbanim. Okay. There's a famous Mesilat Yesharim, Paths of the Just, in which he discusses Teshuvah. I think we like it very much because it helps us out a lot. He discusses what happens when a person does Teshuvah. Where did all those sins go to? And he's actually trying to balance between Rachamim and Din, that both mercy and, let's say, straight logic dictating, Din, let's say law, or what logic would dictate. So the Mesilat Yesharim is trying to balance between both, because he says both of them play out in this world. And here he's discussing where Rachman comes and sort of tempers out the Din. So that's number one on your page. Excuse me for the, I'm at the tail end of something, so it sounds a little funny. So he says like this, Ki lefi shurat hadin mamash, if you're just going to go straight by the letter of the law, hayarui shachotei, three things. A person does a sin, basically he's rebelling against the king. Three things are supposed to happen. What's that? Number one, Ye'nash miyad tekif l'cheto b'liyam tanakal. It should be, what? You rebel against the king? Right away, immediately, off with your head. V'gam sha'onesh atzmo yiyeh b'charon af. It should be very, very serious, the punishment. Karui l'misham amrem pia boreyit barach shemo, which is fitting for somebody who goes against the king. V'shelo yeh tikun l'cheiklal. How can you fix it up? Right? You did something, it's locked in time. Today, because we have technology, we get, we have the pictures, we have videos from way back. It really locks it in, how something it exists. Because the Mesilat Yesharim continues, and Kinei be'emet, it's true. Eich yitakena adam et asher yiveit, v'chet kfar na'asa. How can you fix up that which happened a while ago? Harei sharatzach adam et chavero, harei shana'af. Person does sins. You do, especially when you do a sin against somebody else. Well, that's been already etched in time. It's very hard to turn back on that. You could get an apology. Yeah, that's true from now and for the future, but the wrongdoing still exists there in time. Can you take away something that's already been established within reality? Good question. So those three things are supposed to happen on the spot. What is it? It's supposed to be an immediate punishment, a strict punishment for going against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and lastly, there shouldn't really be any way to fix things up. So each one of those, 1, 2, 3. So this is what the Midas Harachmim does, and he picks them off the Mesilat Yesharim. Says, continuing reading, Amnam Midat Harachmim hi anotenet hefech hashlosha dvarim shezacharnu. This is where Rachamim comes in. Dahainu, first of all, sheyutan zman lachotei, v'lo yichalchei min ha'aretz miyad kishachata. God gives us time to fix things up. All right, we don't get struck down. No lightning bolts come out of heaven. And what else? Sha'onesh atzmo lo yiyeh ad l'kalei, and the punishment is not overly strict. V'shat Teshuvah tinatein lachodim b'chesed gamor, shtechashev akirat haratzon ka'kirat ha'maaseh, and there is something you can fix it up. And this, I think, gives us so much hope, and we basically run with this. Like this piece of Mesilat Yesharim has become sort of, we don't even realize it, but like across the board, people work on this that you could wipe out. You could press the erase button on the video. How does that work? How is it that we could erase that which is in the reality? So this is what happens. We have an example of this in Halacha. Where do we see in Halacha that you could really just reset the whole, what happened in the past? We do this on Erev Rosh Hashanah, I think. Hataras Nedarim, right? How does Hataras Nedarim work? What's Hataras Nedarim? If a person's been, let's say, took a neder, took a vow to do something. Let's say you've been doing something numerous times, a good deed, numerous times, without making a condition from the beginning that I don't want this to be locked in on me. So we said that becomes a little bit like a neder. You know, it's like a vow. You're doing something over and over again. It's a good thing. It's very hard to stop doing it and walk away from it. Not very hard. Halachically, legally, you could become bound to that. So how do you get rid of this? When do we do this on Erev Rosh Hashanah, right? We set up like a Beit. We set up 3 people in front of us, and everybody makes it's a set, it's in the Siddur, but you really have to understand what you're saying. What do? What's the way out of a neder, a vow that we took? You know, how do you nullify it? What's the mechanism? Huh? Beit, and it's called like a petach, which means like a window, an opening. What's the opening? Beit Din should be asking you the following and saying to you, if you would only know at the time that you accepted that vow upon yourself, if you had the whole picture in front of you, would you taken that vow? And that person says, no, I didn't consider all these different things that are taking place. And obviously, if I had a broader understanding at the very beginning, I would never accept upon myself this vow, unconditional vow. So Beit Din says, obviously, it must be that you accepted this vow upon you under wrong pretenses. You were totally mistaken at the time, and therefore, it's going to work la kira la mafreya. In other words, we're going to go retroactively. It's like the vow never took place. That's how it works. That's the mechanism involved. Whereas when you did it under faulty understanding. So it's completely mistaken from the very beginning. It's like it never happened. Yeah.
The vow might not have been valid, but the action that he took following that vow is an action that is in stone. Okay,
so if you did something bad, like we're going to have to deal with a chet. But if you're talking about that, you accepted upon yourself doing something. Okay, let's for the following. I have to give an example, but you accepted upon yourself to do something, proper.
So you're going to get up every morning for 6 o'clock.
I'm going to get the Vatican. That's it. All right? I'm turning over a new leaf. Right? It's better than turning over in bed, right? I'm going to get out of bed every morning. I'm going to be at that first minyan. You do it 1 day, 2 days. You could do it for a very long time. But let's say you didn't even say at first a stipulation. I'm going to see if this works out. 1 day, another day, another day. So you're doing something very good, and we look at it as if you do it 3 days in a row. You establish what's called chazaka. You establish that this is something that becomes sort of legally bound upon you. So then you come back to the Beit Din and said, I never realized how this is going to affect my day. I'm so groggy throughout the day. I can't accomplish anything. If I would have just thought about it enough, I would never have done it. Fall asleep and share. My next comment would be, but okay. So that's something that Beit Din will ask you. I had a case like this, and it's just slipping my mind. I recently here's that case. That really happened. When the yeshivas, they teach us that during Chazarat HaShatz, when the Shliach Tzibor is going back over the Shemona Esrei, in yeshuas, usually people sit. In the yeshivot, you stand the whole time, because it's supposed to be as if the Tzibor together is davening together at that point, not just that the Chazin's going over everything again. So I was doing this for many, many years, and at some point, I still do so, but I wanted not to have to be bound to it so much. So I remember it was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I said to the Chevra sitting in front of me, I said, look, I never took into account, at some point you're a little bit tired, or whatever, I didn't think it through 100%. That's what we did in yeshiva, so I started doing it. So I wanted to have a Torah, just in case there's a day I wouldn't be doing it, so I'd be covered. So my friend who was sitting amongst those three on the basement says, yeah, you never took into account that you're going to get old. So you can't stand the whole time. I said, I didn't say that, but that's a cute guy. Right? He was my roommate, it's all right. But that's an example, really. And then Basin said, mutar lach, mutar lach, mutar lach. They took it off. Legally, I wasn't legally bound anymore.
But these are moral issues.
But that's not a moral. That's standing for the Chazar Tashatz was a straight up halacha. That's not a moral issue. We're talking about mitzvot, how mitzvot could become. So that's the case I'm giving. But let's say a person takes a vow that he says, I vow that I'm quitting smoking.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a good thing to do, but then afterwards he doesn't realize how he's going to, he really can't just do it. He's going to have to go to upstate New York and check in for 3 months into some facility. Like, he didn't take into account everything that's involved, so he can't just stop. He had a vow. He can't just start puffing up again. He would have to get rid of the vow. How would be the Beis Din has to talk to him about it? Did you consider the fact that you'd have such an adverse reaction to giving up smoking? If he never considered that, so then the vow from the very beginning, from the outset, was wrongly done. It never was a vow, and therefore it's called that they're the mafreya. Retroactively, it gets taken away. That's how it works.
But this is in personal things. In other words, if she promises classically charity.
Oh, excuse me?
I think the classic is charity. I'll give X dollars to
Okay.
this group. I don't. How does that work?
All right, move on.
Okay. So if a person accepted upon themselves, then they have to talk to a Beit Din and see.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the point. But it's not like, I'm sorry I brought that guy off. I'll never do it again. That's different.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is how so take a look in the Mesilat Yesharim over here, and he says the last paragraph. He says this is exactly what happens when a person stands up, in order to wipe out the sins on his charts. When a person recognizes the sin, and he acknowledges it, and he's thinking about it, how bad it was, his actions, and he's saying, I should never have done this. It's exactly works like a neder. He regrets it completely. That he wishes that it would never have taken place. And he's so upset in his heart. And then he leaves it, that he's not going to do it again in the future. The fact that out of his desires, it's completely gone. He doesn't want to do it. He feels bad about it, so bad. This is Teshuvah, right? It's exactly like the way that the neder works, and it's off his charts. That's the mechanism involved in Teshuvah. And that's the Mesilat Yesharim says over here that that's mercy. That's rachamim. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to hold you, all those three things. It's not going to happen right away. I'm not going to hold you. You rebelled against it. Rachamim, mercy says that there's a way of wiping it, pressing the erase button on the video, which is an amazing thing. And I think that's a concept that we walk with. We work with that in life. It's because otherwise we'd get bogged down with everything. And it's very hard to continue from year to year. So this is like a golden rule within Judaism. Everybody, if they don't know where it's from the Mesilat Yesharim, and that's what we work with. Rabbi Chanan says, I got a problem though with the Mesilat Yesharim because it could be that his basis is wrong. Why? Let's take a look at the Gemara in Kedushin. We're going to have 3 questions, then we're going to have a fundamental idea. This is old-fashioned. 3 questions, a fundamental idea that we're going to see in the Ramchal, and then we're going to come back and explain everything. So here we go. Look at number 2 on the page. So here in the Gemara in Kedushin, fascinating Gemara about the same topic. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, Afilu tzaddik gamor kol yomav. A person could be a tzaddik all of his days, and then Marad Ba'achrona, and in the end of his life, he decides to rebel against God. Says the Gemara, says Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Ibeidet harishonot. He loses all of his original, all those good deeds, the mitzvot. He loses them. Shenemar tzidkat hatzadik lo tatzilenu biyom pisho, that the righteousness of the righteous that he did all his life shall not deliver him on the day of his transgression if he goes back on them towards the end of his life. That's very harsh. Vafilu rasha gamor, the flip, person is doing sins, kol yamav, asat teshuvah ba'achrona, and then at the end of his life he changes, becomes like righteous. Ein mazkirin lo shuv risho. All those years are wiped out. We don't mention the fact that he was an evil person. Shenemar v'rishat harasha lo yikashel ba b'yom shuvo mirisho. It's for the wickedness of the wicked that he did all his life. He shall not stumble over it on the day that he turns from his wickedness and becomes righteous. So the Gemara asks the following, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, what are you telling me? A person for 80 years is a tzaddik, and then the last years of his life he becomes a rasha, and all of a sudden, like they wiped his slate clean? How can that be? At least, let's say he lives to 100. So it should be at least divided down. 80% good, 20% bad. How can you suggest something like this, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai? So the Gemara says that it should be a percentage based upon his life. Amar Reish Lakish, no. It's not only that he becomes evil at the end of his life, but Torah al Rishonot, when he gets upset about, when he says, I wish I never did all of those in the past. That's the case. I never did all those. That's a case, for example, talk about tzedakah. You hear these things in life. A person says, I used to give them tzedakah. I don't like them anymore. I wish I never gave them anything. Well, wait a second. Don't say that because they're listening up there in heaven. Or, person, I remember when I was a kid, I used to go, for my mom, I used to go to the other community, to Riverdale. I grew up in Yonkers. But I went to the bakery there, so you have a car, and you give somebody a lift home, right? So instead of taking you 10 minutes to get back home, it's a rainy day. Traffic is crazy. It takes you an extra half hour. You walk in the house, Mom says, where have you been? I need you. It's Erev Shabbos. You got to get ready. I said, Mom, I offered the person a ride. It was raining. And I got stuck in traffic. It was one of those days. I should never have offered her the ride. How can you say that? You got to be careful what comes out of your mouth because they're listening. Because Baruch is writing it down. So it says Reish Lakish over here that if you had in mind, who was it? The Gemara. If you are upset about that, what you did in the past, they wipe it off your slate. So wait a second. We got to think about this Gemara. Right? I had these 80 years worth of righteous things. It's on my slate. And then afterwards, a person at the end of his life says, not only am I becoming an evil person, a wicked person, but I wish I never did all those 80 years worth of righteous deeds. Gets wiped off. So wait a second. What was that? Is that Rachamim? That's not Rachamim.
That's the other side.
That's din.
If you do all the bad things and you say, I wish I had never done the bad things, that goes like that too. So that's good.
So that's din. That's what logic dictates. So from this Gemara in Kiddushin, what do you see?
But if you give all the bad stuff, and at the end you say, I wish I had never done the bad stuff, that's Rachamim.
No. It's the same Gemara. Rav Shimon bar Yochai is... But you're not going to give different... You have Rav Shimon bar Yochai says, I got these 2 rules. And he puts them together. He says the same thing. You could split it, possibly. Rabbi Chanan understand that. One is that if everything gets flipped, you decide what you want from the past, and then it's going to flip it. You don't want your mitzvahs on your file, wiped off. You don't want your evil wrongdoings on your file, wiped off. How does that work? Well, I'm not going to wipe off my mitzvahs because that's rachamim, that's mercy. That's what logic dictates. So it's the same cloud, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is saying. When you want to rewrite the past, so we're going to listen, we'll rewrite the past. So it comes out according to this that a person wants to get rid of those transgressions that they had all of his life. That's what logic dictates. It's not a matter of rachamim, such as what the Mesilat Yesharim is saying. It's a matter of din. Gemara and Kiddushin comes out that it's did. Gemara, and then, but the Mesilat Yesharim came out with that's Rachamim. So it's hard to understand where the Mesilat Yesharim got it from.
Isn't it a question of Teshuvah?
Wait. I understand what you're saying, but if you look at the Gemara of Shimon Bar Yochai, he's giving two different klalim, and there's no reason to have to say that. It's working under different mechanisms.
What's the flip side of Did?
Flip side of this is going to be Rachamim. So, no, but...
All this bad stuff, and I say, now I read all the
So
bad
you're
stuff,
taking the...
Now, on the last day, I do all the good stuff.
So you're taking Reb Shimon...
That's Baka.
But you're taking Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's general rule, and you're saying split it in the middle, which you could go that. But the pashtus over here is that he's saying the statement, the Gemara Kedushin, and that they should be functioning under the same rule.
He's saying that for the flip side of holding you accountable for rejecting every good
Right.
stuff, on the last day, that's Did.
That's right.
In my perspective.
Right.
But doing the flip side of it,
I understand, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is giving this... right, but
bad stuff.
Okay. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, though, is giving a klal in the Gemara, and he's not. Okay. So what we have at this point, the question that Rav Elchanan Vassman asked was that you do see that the Gemara Kedushin is saying that that's what logic dictates. You could rewrite what happened in the past. But the Mesilat Yesharim says it works based upon Rachamim. And the question is, how the Mesilat Yesharim, where did he get that from? That's the opening question. Okay? If you like it or not, that's the opening question. Okay? Okay, let's continue on. We're going to flip the page. We have to keep moving. We only have till 4:30 it was. All right? Says number 2. Flip the page. Let's take a look at number 2.
I think the Gemara's question is the problem. Not Mrs. Sharon, that's what he's arguing.
No.
He's arguing that the
he wants
Gemara
to
is
split.
problematic.
He wants to split it.
Moving
Right,
on.
say it. Okay, number 2 on the page. Gemara, here you go. This actually is this week's Parsha. It just comes out that way. Ki yakarei kan sipor lefanecha b'derech b'chol eitz o ala aretz efrochim o beitzim. Person's walking on the way and he sees a nest and they got the eggs in the nest and the mother bird's above it. You're not supposed to take the eggs without chasing away the mother bird at first. Okay? What's the reason behind that? We can give a lot of suggestions, but that's what the halach is written. Okay? The Ramban over here, number 4 on the page, does give suggestions as to what the reason for this mitzvah is. As the Ramban will often do, as all like the Mefarshim usually do, they give reasons for the mitzvot even if they're not necessarily written in the Torah. So here we got, and the Ramban says the following: Gamzu mitzvah mivu'eret. You can explain this mitzvah. It's easy to explain it. It's also like min otov et beno. It's the same mitzvah as the halach of otov et beno. What's that? Otov et beno means you're not allowed to do shchita on the mother cow and the baby cow on the same exact day. That you can't do. Why not? Lo tishchatu b'yom echad ki atam b'shneihem, says the Ramban, lebilti hayet lanu leiv achsari, that we shouldn't have a what's that? A cruelness within our hearts. V'lo nirachem, we shouldn't be not lacking in mercy. Okay, that's one of the reasons given by the Ramban. Interesting. You know, we're allowed to do shchita, but to take the mother and the child at the same time is a little bit, you're overextending it, right? It's too much. To get rid of the bird and the mother bird's there, and it's just, you're being cruel. That's the Ramban. Okay, and we're not, it's a very lengthy Ramban. On Shabbos, take it out. It's this week's Parsha. You'll love it. I just want to go quickly through it to move on. O shelo yatir katuv la'asot hashchata la'akor amin, afal pi sheyitir shchita b'minahu. Right, that you shouldn't be able to, like if you're taking 2 generations of the same animal, it looks like you're uprooting this entire species. It's again things that we stay away from. It looks like you're getting rid of the species. Now you have to be sensitive to this idea. Okay, it's worthy discussion, but not for us now. Here's a case when the Ramban agrees with the Rambam. Doesn't happen all that often. What does he say? Kitam shluach hakam v'tam otov et beno l'shchtu b'yom echad k'dei la'azir shelo yishchad haben b'nei ha'em ki yesh la'beimot ha'agag gdola b'zeh. That you shouldn't go ahead and shech the child in front of the mother, or take away the eggs in front of the mother, or the little birds in front of the mother. Why? Because the animals have these kind of feelings. which is very interesting. That's the Rambam. He says animals do have motherly feelings.
Interesting.
Right? And that's his approach. It's not like they don't have the same kind of reasoning as us, but they do have feelings towards their children. Manyan. So they're giving reasons. And again, the Ramban's very lengthy in this discussion, but it's not for us right now. And here's a case where the Ramban says that the Rambam goes to town to talk about that there is ta'am mitzvos. There's reasons for the mitzvos. That you have reasons. Varhu ma'od is very clear. Because every mitzvah does have a reason. There's reasons for the mitzvahs. Not always written. We could try to figure them out. Whether we get it right or not, you should know it does have an effect upon us. That's the cloud that the Rambam talks about. The Ramban says in this case the Rambam is 100% right. And it's lengthy. Interesting. What's the emphasis of the Ramban in this matter? Where is it, like, what exactly is, again, how does that work? Why is it so important for us to understand this? That's what we're going to sort of clarify more in the Ramban. That's question number 2. And question number 3 is the following. Okay? Bereshis Chavav Hey, and then we'll take a break after the third question before we go to the fundamental idea. It says the third question. Vayeir alav Hashem vayomer. So, if there's a drought in the land, Yitzchak's gone down to the Plishtim in Gerar, and then Hashem says, don't go further to Mitzrayim. Al tered Mitzrayim, Shechem ba'aretz, Shechon ba'aretz asher amar elecha, stay here in Eretz Yisrael. That's why we say that Yitzchak never left Eretz Yisrael, right? He's like Karban Tamima, right? You can't leave Eretz Yisrael. Gor be'eretz azot, eyemcha, you should stay here, I'll be with you, I'll bless you. I'm going to give all of the lands to your children. Right? And he says, I'm going to do that which I told Avram. I'll give you the land. I'm going to make your kids great. And Pasuk Hey, Avraham b'koli. Because why? Because your father Avraham, he went into a covenant with me. And Avram listened b'koli. He listened to my voice. Vayishmar mishmarti mitzvotai chukoltai v'toratai. What's funny about that pasuk? You don't have to be a biblical scholar, right? It's extremely repetitive. And also Torah, I will see in the Ramban. Whereas Avram didn't get the Torah. 1. And also, you're giving me 5 different nouns over here. What's the difference between chukot and torot and mitzvotai? It's very repetitive. Whenever you see something like that in the Psukim, you right away ask yourself, what's going on? Why is the Pasuk being so repetitive? Obviously, in this case, we're going to have to say...
Maybe there's different points.
There's different nuances in the points. Oh, so Rashi over here on the spot, number 6 on your page, Ramban quotes Rashi, is going to give me definitions. B'koli, what does he say? What does it mean? So, Hashem's saying that Avram listened B'koli. He heard my voice. What are we talking about? Keshenisiki yoto. The times that I gave Avram these challenges, to take Akedas Yitzchak, or the different nisyanot that Avram had, or the bris milah in front of the world. These are, Avram listened to me. Mishmarti, from the word, what's the root of Mishmarti? Shmor, to guard something. What is that talking about? Gezerot lahar chaka, kegon shniyot la'arayot. In other words, when there's gezerot that we put in, to be shomer, the original mitzvah. So such as what we call shniyot la'arayot, certain people you can't marry, that otherwise midiraita on the Torah level you would be able to. So for example, a case would be grandparents. It's not in the Torah, but there's an extra isur with grandparents to marriage. When he says something like this as far as shvut on Shabbat, we got the laws of Shabbat, but the rabbis added on certain restrictions to guard the original rule. Mitzvotai. What's that referring to? Mitzvot, commandments, she'ilu lo nichtavu dinhu she'yikatvu, that even if they're not written, right, that lo nichtavu, it would have been understood that you should write it. Kagon gezel, shvichot dam, or shvichut damim. These are called mitzvot sichliot, things that just everybody understands. It's your proper logic would dictate. Chukotai, what's a chok? That we know, paraduma. Devarim sheyetzer harav umot olam mishivim aleim. Kagona chilat chazer levishat shatnez she'ein tam b'davar. that there's no understanding necessarily of the reason for that mitzvah. Shamel ela shamel kazar ko al avadav v'torotai lavitor shabal peh halacha Moshe Sinai. So Rashi is explaining what the lengthiness in this pasuk, the redundancy. Each one of these are nuanced, and they refer to different aspects of Torah. But then we come to your question. Sorry, I'm getting the Steve. So you're saying, but where did Avram never got commanded in Torah? Where's this from? So that's where the Ramban continues. Bet 6b. Vim Kenya closed it benui al dat shaya Avram mekayem u'mishamer ta Torah ad shelo nitna. Right, it's going to come down that we see that Avram and the Avos, they observed Torah even before it was offered. How could they have come up with Torah even before it was offered?
The whole question, what was he doing in the tent when the three strangers showed up? Some say it was Pesach.
Some say it was Pesach, right? And we have other references, right? Ramban brings down Kachamru pasuk vayitein lehem Yosef agalot, that Yosef sends back these wagons back. Galot. It was a tip-off to his father that what? After 22 years, I still remember the sugya that we were learning before I was sent down to Egypt. Huh? It was never written. Egla Rufa. But it's all over Shas about this. Sheperish bimenu b'pashat Egla Rufa. Sheyosek b'Torah. That they were learning, page 3. Shayavotav, Shem Shayavotav, Adak Shavlo the Torah. Wait a second.
Yeah, but
yeah. Shamar Moshe Mishamar Filu Tiktuk De Torah. So okay, Shayosek Batok Shem Shayavotav. Yosef did Torah just like his forefathers, and Torah wasn't given yet. So we see over here, you're going to have to say when the pasuk tells me that Avram did all these things. Okay, how did he do it? Where did he get it from? In Gimel says V'yesh l'sholim kein echikim Yaakov matzeva. But if that be the case, that the Avos are observing Torah, they're deep, they're Nevi'im, they had such a deep concept and look into life and look into the world, connecting up with God, they had understanding how you do things properly. And through their Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, they're Nevi'im. Through their Nevuah, they came to an understanding of Torah before it was even given. So then you could ask the question, famous question in the Ramban, Im kein echikim Yaakov matzeva v'nasa shtei achayot. So how can Yaakov have established a matzeva? There's an issue to establish a stone, matzeva, for worship. How did he marry 2 sisters? Right? And if you want, you might be 4 sisters. How does he marry Rachel and Leah? Ukedas Rabosenu Arba, because it seems that the Bill and Zippa also were part of the family there. And Amram married Yocheved, who was his aunt. How could you do all these things? It's against the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu Hikim Shtei Asrei Matzevot. He also, Moshe puts up Matzevot, which is Asur. And God just says that Avram didn't do these things. He observed Kol Torah Kula, including D'Rabbanans, and he kavah lo Shem v'kavah lo Hashem schar al hadavar. God's saying here to Yitzchak, not only did Avram observe all this, but he commanded his children to do so after him. So here's the Ramban's conclusion. Avram did have it all down. It's through his Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh. The Asak ba v'tamei mitzotev v'sodoseh v'shamar alta kula k'misha eno mitzvah v'yos. And he did it all. Was he commanded? It was not commanded. But he did it anyway because he came to this understanding that that's what's proper and that's how the world should work.
But Hashem gave him that possibility to do. In other words.
Okay. Again, well.
No, so otherwise, that makes it stronger. It wasn't just his idea.
No, but it was. He understood the world. Like that's the game. That's the play, the playing field. We all started out with God established this world, but he found himself in it, and he was focused enough to come up with all this. So he's saying that's from okay. Ushmirat Torah be'eretz bulvad. But he did this in Eretz Yisrael. V'Yaakov b'chutz la'aretz nasa achayot v'chein Amram ki mitzvah mishpat alei ha'aretzein. He did it only in Eretz Yisrael. Once he walked out of Eretz Yisrael, then he didn't feel bound to that which they were doing voluntarily. That's really hard to understand. And Moshe Rabbeinu also. So that's a question on the Ramban. Like, what's the Ramban saying? Why should it make a difference if you're doing it voluntarily? doing it voluntarily in Eretz Yisrael, do it voluntarily in Chutz La'aretz. What's the difference? It's very hard to say. Today we're commanded, right? We're commanded to do things. So we're commanded to do it in Eretz Yisrael. We're also commanded to do it in Chutz La'aretz, because you walk out to Chutz La'aretz, doesn't necessarily, we still have that same commandments. Now the Gemara, the Sifri talks about in this, I think we all grew up with Tzivilach Tziyunim, that when we go to Chutz La'aretz, there's Yirmiyahu is saying that you should continue to be able to do the mitzvahs. Why? Because they're Tziyunim, what? Like we say, training, practice sessions. So I don't know about that translation. What it's a practice session when Chutz La'aretz, it's only practice. So I had a Rebbe of mine, Rav Gantz, in Shalavim, he said a very beautiful mashal. It's not just practice. I mean, they're laws. You have to observe mitzvot all over the world. But he gave a great mashal. Like a lot of us, I think, are from America or something like that. There's a lot of people from the state, or from wherever. And we've all experienced, I think a lot of Jews live outside. Anybody lived outside the city, in the suburbs, the burbs, right? Think about this. You're driving 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. Like where I grew up in Willavaston, suburb, you got nice wide streets. This mashal will work well if you think about suburbs of New York. So you got nice wide streets, and it's 3 o'clock at night in the suburbs. Any other cars on the road? No. So you're driving down, you're going to get home, you're tired, it's after Chasna, you're so tired. You come to the end of the street and there's like a stop sign, okay? Somehow, stop signs at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night change their shape and they become a little bit like a yield sign at best, right? Because it's a rolling stop. I like it. We'll call it a rolling stop. It's like a yield sign. Huh? Yeah, but the truth is at night, if there's a car coming from the other direction, you're going to see the headlamps. It's so safe. What? If they're on. It's no problem. Like you're coming down there, nobody... I shouldn't say nobody. We might have tzaddikim amongst us. Most people don't stop, a full stop, that you feel the car falling back at a stop sign at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. So you're rolling stop, you roll through that stop sign. There just happens to be a policeman over there. What's going to happen? You got a ticket. Do you really deserve a ticket? Not really. No. Why? It's the law. You're saying yes. It's the law, right? Of course. But do they really care? Like, is anything really going to happen? Why can't that become a yield sign? Theoretically, if it was all electronic, it should be a yield sign. Like when in Yerushalayim, I love when you get there and it starts... what?
Company picnic that the cops can have.
Yeah. You guys are Yerushalmis. Bottom of Agron, right? How many people have gotten tickets at the bottom of Agron? When you get to the bottom over there, you can't see it, but the left one is just a turning lane. And they don't have signs on the street till the very end because the traffic's always backed up. You never see the turning arrows on the streets. They always wait there on the other side. Why is there a law that you have to stop on the bus to get a ticket? Why do you get a ticket at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night?
Because that's when it's even more dangerous.
Like you're there, someone else can be there.
You'll see it's a headlight. Because they're concerned about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Habit.
That is why. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to go through, that stop sign, and then it's dangerous. So why is there laws on the book at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night? Is it a law? Yes. Will you get a ticket? Yes. But the real concern of government in that case is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Rav Gantz used to say, yeah, for sure there's laws, and we have to do the Torah in Chutz La'aretz, for sure. But Hashem really had in mind that we should be doing them here in Eretz Yisrael. And that's how he explained this idea. But if you're not commanded, the avos aren't commanded. So what's the difference? So you're not commanded, but you do it anyway. So do it in Eretz Yisrael. Do it. The playing field should be the same all over. How do you understand the Ramban? So this is the three things that we have to discuss real quickly, or that we have to answer. We'll do the Yesod, the fundamental idea of the Ramchal. We want to understand why, not everybody like this, but we want to understand why the Gemara in Kedushin says that when you are able to wipe out the slate, both mitzvot and sins, get it off your slate, that seems to be the way things work. That's logic. That's how the legal system. And yet the Mesilat Yesharim said, no, it's all rachamim. It doesn't seem like that from the Gemara in Kedushin. One. Number two, why is it that the Ramban and the Rambam, but the Ramban is saying, yes, the mitzvos do have tam the mitzvos. We got to search them out. You got to understand it. Why is he being so exacting on understanding this idea? And thirdly, how do you understand the fact that the avos observed the mitzvot voluntarily, but in Eretz Yisrael, in Chutz La'aretz, that they, for reasons that they needed, they would go ahead and not listen to the mitzvahs. Those are the three questions we're dealing with. We got one fundamental idea, and when we see it, then we'll be able to answer all of this and walk away happy. Okay, let's take a look at number 4 on your page. I'll try not to read all of it. You guys could do that on your own. But Derech Hashem, the Ramchal. Who's Ramchal? Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato. When's the Ramchal live? I think 1600s, 1700s. All right. So the Ramchal, in his Derech Hashem, the way of God, is very popular. It's become much more popular in the world today. A lot of the writings of Ramchal have become more popular. More pnimius Torah. And again, I don't know if this resonates by anybody, but when I was growing up, if you ask somebody why is it that God created it all? Why do we do Torah? Okay. Or in other words, you'd say, what does God want of us? What would we say? Shomer Torah mitzvos. And that was very much the world that we grew up in. You ask kids nowadays, I'll teach like this also, why is it that God creates the world? I'll say because he wants to give over good. Right? That's the answer that usually they'll do. What's the greatest good God can give?
Life.
Even more than life? That which is all perfect?
They cannot be able to relate to him.
Oh, so God himself. This is the beginning of the Ramchal, of the Derech Hashem. The greatest good, I used to tell my, Jita the Sixth, poetic license. Greatest good God can give is God himself. Jita the Sixth. That's this idea that Kadosh Baruch Hu is all perfect. How do we get a Kadosh Baruch Hu? So he creates us with the guidelines, what is good and what is bad. And he also gives us the ability to choose, every time we choose good. So then we become that much better, much more goodly, godly. And that's the affinity that we have to Kadosh Baruch Hu, that at some point in our existence we have that closeness to Hashem. That's the opening parokim of the Derech Hashem. But that's the world that I think a lot of kids are growing up in today in high schools. They'll be teaching Ramchal. The Ramchal continues with the following ideas. He says that God placed us in the world with challenges. Okay, the very beginning of the paragraph over here. Inyan ha'adam atzma. When it comes to mankind, hinei kfar zacharno eichu murkav. Echad shenitrachvu bo beis hafachim, dahainu haneshama v'aguf. This is straight up Ramchal, that we have a tension within us. Mitzad echad, we have our neshama that's trying to make us more pure. And what's the other side? Our goof, our body, our physical being that's trying to make us more physical. And there is always a tension amongst them. If you look at the Rinas Yisrael, they did it, I think, properly. That when you daven in the morning, in America it wasn't like, in the Rinas Yisrael they put the brach of Asher Yatzar and the brach of Elokai Neshama Shenatata Bi Torahi. Those two brachas, they put them right one next to each other, that they should be said juxtaposed. What's the idea? Because a person mitzad recognized that there are asher yatzar sadam, that the bodily functions, it's very much physical. But right after that, we talk about the neshama that God gave us, Torahi, how pure it is, and that to remind us that there's going to be this tension between the two, pulling in different directions. So that's this idea of juxtaposing those two brachos.
Because the kind of Shema doesn't start with a bracha. It's
bracha smucha lechaverta. Yeah.
That's why it's together.
If you look at this in the Sidur that we grew up with in America, we didn't have them next to each other.
No, the Birkas Torah in between.
In the Sephardic,
In the Birkas Torah has then the bracha, the psukim. So it's hard to understand also because bracha smucha lechaverta. All right, but okay.
It's always together.
Okay, right. But I'm just saying that you see, Rinas did it right. But even if I'm looking over here in this Siddur, it doesn't necessarily come out like that. Here they're going to have it. Here they do it right. There's strong. Okay, but the way I got. Okay, now so the same like this. So the Ramchal continues afterwards to discuss this tension that we find within ourselves, and therefore he says Hashem placed us in this world. But he says not only do we have the battle, but we could take that which is physical and the concept in the Chassidus, right, of being mekadesh the chol. We can take that which is physical and use it for mitzvos, and that's even not only that has to be attention, we have to negate or be ascetics. But no, we're able to bring the gufani matters, physical matters, along with us. We're going to get into Shabbos, the concept of owning Shabbos, etc. I'm going to skip over to Vav. Okay? Shorish Avoda. So he writes like this. V'nei Shorish Kol Inyan Avoda Hu Heyot Adam Poneh Tamid Leboro. We're focused on God. V'sheidav Yavin Shuhu Lo Nifra Eli Liyot Midabik Beboro. And that's the challenge, and this is famous also Mesil Yisharim. The idea being is that we want, right, Ramchal wrote also Mesil Yisharim, that's where I knew I had the dates. He lived from 1707 to 1746, and they should know, so that Lo Hushidav Yavin, that the idea in this world is to cling to Hashem, V'lo Sam B'zeh Olam Eliyot Kovesh Et Yitzro, Mishaber Atzmo Leboro, B'koach HaSeichel. You want to tie into a Kadosh Baruch Hu with your intelligence, Hefech Tavot HaChomer V'nitito, and also he wants to take that which is the desires on the physical basis and also bring that along. V'yeh manhiget kol pulutav la'asagat tachlit hazeh v'lo yitam mimenu. So therefore, he says earlier that God sets us up in the world and he's going to give boundaries to our lives in this world. In other words, everything is defined. These are things within the physical realm that are going to be allowed and these are not allowed to. And if you follow that path, then you're going to be discerning within the physical realms. You're going to be taking things within the physical realm and using it towards God, and that's really the ball game that God set up for us. When we do take that which is in the physical realm and use it for God, so we're bringing upwards also, even within the physical, towards the Kodesh Baruch. And now he sets up a number Zion, and this is the basic fundamental idea. He says, God split it amongst two. We do things because God commanded us, and other actions in the day. And we got necessities of life. So we have things that we do that are commandments, and things that we do that are necessities, and that's how our day plays out. Perish. Some things are defined exactly as being very formally actions of commandments. That which we use from this world, there are necessities, and those things again, they're defined by God, what is allowed and what is not, and that's how we're able within that, what would otherwise seem just to be the mundane, is not mundane at all. Those are our challenges, and that's how we're able to take that which otherwise might be mundane and bring it to be more spiritual. Masa mitzvos, but when it comes to the actions that we listen to God's commandments, number one is that when you're doing this, you're trying to do God's bidding. So that's Bechla. That's why God creates the world. That's the whole system, according to the Ramchal, that God puts us in this world for us to have an affinity to Him. When you do a mitzvah, you accomplish two things. One is first of all, you're listening to God. You're listening to the King. Right? That God wants you to do something, and you do it. And there's also an aspect that you're having an effect upon yourself. Mishtalem, from the word shlemut, you're perfecting yourself, your neshama, in some fashion. In other words, the Ramchal is very much coming out there and saying every single mitzvah, and this is a discussion amongst the medieval philosophers, if this is true, but he says every single mitzvah God gave us, the creator of the world, knew exactly what we need for us to perfect ourselves within this world, and therefore the mitzvahs come to define us, they come to perfect us, everything we do is going to have an effect upon us in some fashion, in our neshama, both in the physical realm, also have better lives, and also on a neshama level. So when you do a mitzvah, one, there's the idea of listening to the melech, to the king, and number two, there's the idea of perfecting ourselves. The Ramban and the Rambam also felt like this very much. The Maharal in the beginning of Tiferes seems to suggest over there that there were philosophers who argued on this. But that is something why the Ramban and Rambam felt it was so important to talk about this idea of Tamla mitzvos, in which the aspect of not only the zivui of the melech, listening to the king, but the aspect that's perfecting ourselves. Now, there's a lot. I remember Rav Noach Weinberg at Aish used to talk a lot. It even perfects our lives. In other words, a person learns it perfects our life within this world. It's all for the good. Like achtov natati lachem. But the idea is also perfects our neshama. So every mitzvah has these two aspects to it. And this is the Ramchal goes at length in proving this point. If you take this as a klal, so this is what we're going to. First, let's go back to the avos. So the avos are here in Eretz Yisrael, okay? And this is why we could give ourselves pats on the shoulder. I'd say this with fear. If I say this in chutzlas, I have to put like a raincoat on in case they throw tomatoes at me. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Let's think about it together. If the avos are listening to they understood Torah based upon Nevuah. Okay, so they're observant of this. When they're observing their Torah, why are they observing it? They figured it out. So there's two aspects to every mitzvah. There's listening to God, the Melech, and there's also has an effect upon my neshama. So why are the avos in Eretz Yisrael doing the mitzvah? Were they commanded from God to do so? No. So it's not that. So we're left with one other reason. It's being mashlim the neshama in some way. They're perfecting themselves. So again, what happens when they walk into chutz la'aretz? Huh? So that's the what Rebbe Chanan Vassman himself is saying. He lived in chutz la'aretz, and I don't go to the extreme of saying no, it doesn't count. But he is saying there. Let's just put it this way, and this is fair: that there is a different level of effect of shleimut, of the perfection that occurs within a person's neshama when mitzvahs are done in this country, done in Eretz Yisrael. Because when they went out to chutz la'aretz, the avot, they're not commanded, right? That's one aspect. What's the other aspect? The hashlama, the perfection of the neshama. So they felt that in chutz la'aretz they could basically, there were times that they were able to walk away from the doing of the mitzvahs in chutz la'aretz. Says Rabbi Chanan, I'm not saying this, Rabbi Chanan Vassam, says that's the understanding. If you understand these two aspects of accomplishing every mitzvah, you understand why there was a difference in the avos between when they were in Eretz Yisrael and when they were in chutz la'aretz. That's challenging, right? That's fine for us. We live here, Baruch Hashem. But you say that in chutz la'aretz, look, we have 2,000 years of Jews, of tzaddikim in the chutz la'aretz. I'm not extreme on this thing. I do say that you do see this in Chazal, that there is a difference for sure. The perfection upon a person's neshama. Rabbi Chanan Vassman is saying he was the Rav in Kafno, in Baranovich. He's saying there's a difference in Eretz Yisrael. So then we could understand very clearly what happened. So why is that? What's the Ramban getting at? And that's how he explains the difference of the avos, why they observed in Eretz Yisrael and not in Chutz La'aretz. Okay.
You can see it. You feel it when you go away. You go abroad. You see the difference.
Get off the plane, you feel it.
You're all saying that because that's why you're here.
Okay.
There's a certain kedusha that Israel has, and that's why Rachel did not come back and stay married. Okay? That's why she was not.
The Ramban L'Shitato is saying that Yaakov could not be married to two sisters when they came back into Eretz Yisrael, so she died in the gvul of coming to Eretz Yisrael. That's the Ramban L'Shitato. But the explanation that Rabbi Chanan says, this is how it works. This is the idea behind it. Because every mitzvah has two aspects to it: listening to the king, and also the perfection. And when you do both of those, then that's again comes back around that's the whole purpose for the creation, according to the Ramchal. So you're adding an added element to it. Says Rabbi Chanan Vassman like this. Okay, this is Rabbi Chanan Vassman. He says, I'm going to tell you, we had a question because the Gemara in Kedushin seems to suggest that a person can change his entire past. And that's what din dictates, right? And yet the Mesilas Yesharim is talking about something with mercy. You need mercy, you need rachamim to be able to press the reset button on all those things that you did in the past. So Rabbi Chanan Vassman says Tzvai Din, and they're talking about two separate things. What's the Gemara in Kedushin talking about? Gemara in Kedushin is talking about the aspect of listening to God, to a mitzvah, the aspect of listening to the king. That's all it's talking about. Meaning, okay, to illustrate the matter, if a person's been the viceroy of a king for 80 years, and then all of a sudden, in his 80th year of life, he sneaks over the enemy lines, goes to the other king, and he says to the next king, he says, I've changed my mind, I want to pledge allegiance to you, sire. So what's the second king going to do? King B, what's he going to do? He's going to say, off with your head because he's going to say, welcome aboard. So everything that you did up until now, forget about it. But now you're in my camp, so we'll give him honors. That's pledging loyalty. That's listening to the king or not listening to the king. Says Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, that's what the Gemara in Kedushin is talking about. Person for 80 years of his life said tzaddik, and then all of a sudden he becomes a Rasha, and he says, all those things in the past, wow, I wish I never did them. Okay, so you don't have loyalty to the king? Seder, you don't want that file? Okay, we'll take the file off the shelf and put it in the garbage can. That's logic dictating. Person's been a rush all of his life, and then all of a sudden he says, you know what? Well, I'm crazy. God, I pledge allegiance to you. Hashem says, great, you're no longer in the camp of the Risham, you're in the camp of those who listen to Kadosh Baruch. That old file of yours, we'll take that and put that in the garbage dump. That's because logic dictates. Where's your loyalties? You're listening to the king or not? But yeah, a person's been evil all of his life, now in God's camp. Okay, you're listening to God. We're not going to get you in trouble for that. You're no longer rebelling. But what did you do to your neshama for the last 80 years? Have you sullied your neshama because of everything that you've been doing wrong? What are you going to do about that? How are you going to get rid of that? How are you going to erase all the filth, right? So that's what the Mesilat Yesharim is talking about. How do you press the button on that? So that's when you do Teshuvah. That's when you do Charata. And that's what Mesilat Yesharim is saying. That comes from Rachamim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It happened. It exists in time. It's a reality, those things that we've done. But when a person comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, I fully feel like such remorse on what happened, and I reject what I've done, so then Hashem says, so your neshama, I'll take care of it. And God wipes the slate clean. And that's because of Rachamim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's how Rabbi Elchanan explains the contradiction between Gemara Kedushin and the Mesilas Yesharim. So what you take away is that's amazing. So mitzad echad we know that we come in, we're machter Kadosh Baruch Hu on Rosh Hashanah. That's all Rosh Hashanah, right? That is Melech, Melech, Melech. We crown the coronation of the king, and that's pledging allegiance to Hashem. And then as far as everything else that maybe we stepped aside over the past year, so we do Teshuvah, and Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to wipe the slate clean for us on that. And that gives us the ability to continue on and be able to, have a great year ahead, because we start out, and it's not like we beat ourselves up, but truth is, you pledge allegiance, you feel remorse. Kadosh Baruch Hu's Rachamim. He wastes all that, and then you could continue on feeling good and having the strength to continue to build. Especially us who are living here in Eretz Yisrael, not only are we listening to the King, but the perfection that it gives for us, the performance of mitzvahs in this country, which is not only the mitzvahs per se, but the mere act of us living over here in this country. That's Yishuv Haaretz. Our entire lives in this country is one big mitzvah, fulfillment of Kadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. So that we're allowed to give ourselves also a pat on the shoulders and say, that's a perfection of the neshama. With all of these things going on, if you think about it, it should be able to give us the strength to continue, to be able to enter to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, to be able to be blessed with a great, great year ahead, and Kadosh Baruch Hu, and further perfections of ourselves. So Yashar Kol to you. Thank you. Have a good year. Shana Tova.
Question.